Good evening, good evening, good evening, and thank you for joining me, Kim Alexander from Moms of Black Boys United, tonight for our close out of Women's History Month. And I know everybody is surprised because there's not a woman sitting in front of me right now, and we're not talking to a woman tonight. We're talking to Dr. Hasshan Batts, who is in Pennsylvania. He is a visionary. He is the son of a Black woman who poured into him. He is in the community doing his thing, and we are so excited to have you. I want to read the first paragraph of your bio because it was really, really moving to me to hear how you described yourself. So it says Dr. Batts is a survivor, healer, son, father, grandfather, brother, husband, and friend. In addition, Dr. Batts is a tri-sector leader, philanthropist, author, community epidemiologist, community-based participatory researcher, and leading expert on trauma-informed care, re-entry, and community engagement. I don't know what's left for you to do.
Listen, all of that goes to say I love my people, man. Like that's it. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Kim.
Amen. Thank you. So tonight we are talking about Mama, you are making history.
That's right.
And there is no better person to sit here and talk to about the regular mother, the mom of a Black boy who becomes a Black man, um, than Dr. Batts, because his story is so long, but the voice of his mother never left him. But it is the reason why he is who he is today. Um, in our little mini prep right before this call, I told you I was going to start in your 11th year. I've listened to some of the podcasts and talks you've done, and you shared with me, and I was really touched by how many times this world tried to push you down,
That's right.
starting as young as 11. So I'll let you tell it. What happened at 11?
So I mean, let me start by saying shout out to Mama Bat. So we're gonna talk more about my mother who loved her sons, man. You know, and the sisters on this call can relate to that. So there was much before 11, right? But I think 11 was, when I look back at it, the time where I can see the system failure. So not the people failing, but I can really begin to see the system failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell the story about being left back in school, about the first time I was arrested, about all these things that were going on in my life. I was what you would call a super utilizer, right? So monthly being hospitalized for asthma attacks. So we're thinking about the healthcare system, the educational system, the criminal justice, juvenile justice system, all converging at one point, and no one asking, was I okay? Was I safe? What was going on? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I tell the story about being 11. Like the first time I was arrested, no one wondered, like, why was this young Black boy exhibiting these behaviors, acting out that way, right? And I talk about, like, I found my grandmother dead on the kitchen floor, like,
Mm-hmm.
and what that did to me, right? The first time I saw someone murdered in my neighborhood, I'm from Brooklyn, right? And we always talk about the Brooklyn of the 80s and the things that I witnessed. But the first time that I witnessed it, I was just a little, my mother would call me her beautiful baby boy, right? So I was just this little, beautiful Black baby boy that didn't know what to do with that, right? Wrestling with being molested at the same time. Like, so all of these experiences rolling around in my little body, and the world just punching on me at the same time that I was punching on myself internally. And the only support that I would say I really had was Mama Batts, man. Was my mother who wouldn't quit, like, who would keep going and keep going and keep going and telling me how beautiful I was, how brilliant I was, all that I could be.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I began to believe it, right? So when you ask me what happened at 11,
Mm-hmm.
I think at 11, and this is a revelation right now, the way you asked it. At 11, I became a Black man. I started to become a Black man. Like, we have to grow up so fast, right? That's what the world started to see me as, and hold me accountable. So if I threw a chair at a teacher, it was like serious. It wasn't, that I needed support and I needed love and I needed
Mm-hmm.
consistency and nurturing. I needed to be punished and disciplined and, you know. So at 11, I think,
Criminalized.
say that again.
You were criminalized.
Yeah, pathologized and criminalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
At 11 years old, and we know like you're a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little guy. I'm bigger now, but at
Mm-hmm.
16, I was about a buck 40, 5'2". So think about it, 11.
Yeah. How did that change? And you also talk about being suspended, being arrested. Um, you said, and then you said no one asked if you were okay. And I can relate to that. I relate to it because what I always said was no one asked me why.
That's
Not
right.
even if I was okay, but why?
Or what's going
Where,
on? Right?
right? Where, like, what was the inception of the behavior?
Yeah.
And so you said you started punching on yourself. What did that look like?
So that looked like the rage. Not necessarily punching on myself. So my brother, who was about 18 months, 2 years older than me,
Mm-hmm.
he used to just beat me up all the time, right? So my brother beat on me and I beat on the world. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't necessarily punch on myself in like a self-destructive way,
Mm-hmm.
self-harming way, but the destruction that I carried was damaging me so much. I
Right.
was constantly in trouble. And I was intelligent, so I knew the ramifications of my decisions, but
Right.
I was just constantly causing and creating havoc, right? Like this cloud, this storm that was following me, um, that was doing damage.
Yeah. Yeah. That was
Well,
doing damage. But what was it doing damage to? It wasn't just doing damage to the outside world. What I'm trying to get at, and what I'm hearing, and what I want our viewers to hear and understand was you were volatile on the outside, but on the inside, you were so self-destructive because you had been told so many times over and over and over again by all of these entities, all of these institutions that started failing you, that you weren't worthy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had been told and I had been shown it, right?
Right.
And I had so much to say. I mean, we talk about the greeting, sawubona, right? Like, I see you. I just needed to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of my home, nobody saw me.
Wow.
Unless I was screaming and yelling or swinging, or unless I was doing something, nobody. I didn't have an opportunity to feel like outside of my home.
Mm-hmm.
So and then there was dysfunction and stress and stuff going on in the home also. But those behaviors were, I wanted to be recognized in
Right.
any way possible. Teachers didn't want me in class.
Mm-hmm.
Neighbors didn't want me on the block, like playing, right? Police were this was jump out, stop and frisk. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
77th precinct, you can Google them and think about the atrocities that we experienced. So just to be seen as fully human
Mm-hmm.
required me to be loud, and me to be extreme. And then, like I shared, I was a little guy. So,
Mm-hmm.
so to protect myself, growing up in this environment outside my home, when you're either a wolf or a sheep, and a sheep is like a sad existence. So I had to choose to become a wolf,
Yeah.
right? And no one understood that. When we fail to keep children safe in our communities, um, they bond together, with gangs and weapons and violence, and then as you shared, they become criminalized. They criminalize us or pathologize us for that basic human right of safety, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I was searching for: safety, belonging. I mean, the basic human rights. I wasn't asking for anything special.
And it's interesting. I want to go into some of the other work that you've done, especially in the detention centers. But before we go there, as Moms of Black Boys United, we get the question all the time: what are you saying and what are you doing about gun violence? And I know we'll talk more about gun violence because that's one of the huge things that you work with, and you have brought to fruition my idea of what the radical change in what some might consider black on black crime. I don't personally think that exists. I think people who are in each other in their neighborhood, they hurt each other.
Right.
But I think that it's twofold. One, it's about resources, right?
Right.
When a community doesn't have resources, they go out and they look for those resources. If the resource that they're looking for is love, then it's gangs. If it's food, then they rob. If it
Got it.
or steal. Like, so whatever that lacking is, somebody is going to go out and try to find it. And if we start to reinvent how we love our children, if we take the trauma out of the household, both because of generational trauma and because of the trauma that this world forces us to put on our children, if we get our kids to truly love each other like neighbors,
That's
if
right.
we reach that place of radical welcome like you talk about,
That's it.
then I don't want to hurt you. So there's a lot of, it's multifaceted. And I'm not saying that it is this cookie cutter answer to the problem. I'm saying it starts with Maslow's hierarchy. It starts with the foundational things that we all need. And I think a good story to share to talk about that is a story that I heard you share before, which is about a young man named Kareem. Can you tell us who Kareem was?
Yeah. So I was working at a, juvenile justice facility in Pennsylvania, and this was one of the, if you check out this documentary Kids for Cash, man, this judge was like getting paid to get lock kids up. It's insane.
Mhm,
But this was one of those facilities, and Kareem was this young man who, in Pennsylvania, you get adjudicated, and you have to go through like victim offender processes if it's a violent crime to get out, right? Like, so you can be incarcerated from like 11 to 22 years old if you don't get out. Every 6 months there's a review. So
mhm,
I was Kareem's case manager, and Kareem's one of these young men that he had to do a victim impact statement. That's
mhm,
all he had to do to leave. He had worked his way through the program. He could have went home after a couple years, and he kept refusing to do this victim impact statement.
mhm.
So I I'm asking Kareem, what's going on? And one day he just broke down, and Kareem is like, nobody gave a damn about me all the times I was victimized.
Mhm.
Like, he's in tears, he's shaking, and he's like, F them.
Right.
Well, that is life. Um, and I can relate to that, and we can relate to that when we look at this idea of dual victims in our communities. We have families that one son is doing life, the other son has been murdered. Um, and we also know that upwards to over 70% of survivors of violence,
Mhm.
excuse me, of perpetrators of violence are survivors of violence. So,
Mhm.
so it's this cycle, right? So when you think about Kareem, when you think about me at 11 years old, there is this African saying that says the child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Yep,
And that's what we're talking about.
yep.
And mothers understand that.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about your mom.
Mama Batts, man, she was the most brilliant person I've ever known. She was a warrior. She was a panther. So I came up, with that emphasis on what did it mean to be black, and not only what did it mean to be black. I mean, in a beautiful sense. Like, she had this vision of blackness that I'm just now beginning to step into.
Mm,
You know, because it wasn't the reality that I saw around me. What she envisioned, what she had experienced. She would always talk about what it was like when she was coming up, and what we could be. She was someone that really poured my potential into me.
mhm.
Little man, my mom's was about 4'11", but would stand up to the best of them for her sons, for her people, for herself. Taught us, she was a warrior, man. So she taught us to fight.
Mhm,
To fight for ourselves, to fight for each other, to fight for the community. Um, I think about my mother, and she was a reader. She had bookshelves in the house, and as soon as I could read, she had me read this book, The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, Jawanzo Kunjufu. That
Wow.
that was Mama Batts. Mama Batts wanted to make sure that I knew what was in front of me, like what was ahead,
Mhm,
that I wasn't complicit in my destruction. Uh,
mhm.
and I think most importantly, she loved me through my poor choices,
Amen, amen.
and
Yeah,
that's hard, right?
yeah. It's you know, it's hard, but not hard because we don't want to. At least I speak for myself. It's not hard because we don't want to. It's hard because we see you.
Mm,
You
Mm,
know, it's hard because we want you to remember who you are.
that's right. That's right.
And you know, as a parent, I've been there where I'm like, just remember who you are. And the moment, that very moment that you remember who you are, that's the moment that not just me as a mother makes history. That's the moment that you make history too. It's the moment you made history, Dr. Bass.
That's right. But it
You
takes time, right? You guys are planting seeds, and I think from the young men I've worked with, from myself, from my sons, I have a 27-year-old son and a 1-year-old son, right?
Mhm.
I don't know that we believe you. I don't know that we believe you. When I talk to my son, I don't know that he believes me yet. That's
Mhm.
that switch that hits that it's like, okay, you are telling me the truth. This is who I really am.
Yeah.
And then we step into it, right? Like people often ask me, what am I most proud of in my life with all my accomplishments? And I'm most proud that my mother died so proud of me.
Amen.
Yeah, like and I don't know if I could say I made up for. I really worked hard to make up for the stress and the strife that I caused her, man. Like, getting arrested, getting locked up, getting caught up in drama in the streets, everything. I've kicked out of every school possible. And she was there by my side, man. And you don't see it at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Don't
we
you
talk about just keeping on, like just keep
Mhm.
don't give up. It can be daunting to love your black son. The world is out there. You asked me about being 11, and it's like I was born into a world that hated me. This didn't start at 11 years old, right? But your mother there to hold you and to stick by your side. You can't give up, and you know that already. I just want to reiterate it. You can't give up, man. I have so many men in my life that it clicked. It may
Mhm.
have been at 30, it may have been at 50, right? But it
Mhm.
clicked, you know?
I think one of the biggest fears and challenges is we know how the world sees you. They don't see you the way that I see you. You're
Right.
not my son, but as your sister in love, you know, I see you, right?
I'm
And
here.
so, and so when I think about when you said I've been rejected, kicked out, locked up, asked to leave, placed in solitary confinement, was left back in kindergarten, left back in seventh grade, spent 3 years in the ninth grade, and then left school in the 11th grade. I'm so grateful.
Pushed out of the 11th grade, right?
Yeah, like I'm so grateful that you found your place. But how many of our young men don't
Yeah.
because the system won't let their ankles go.
Mm.
And so I think the perpetual go, go, go for us as mothers is I just got to get you to the point where you see you the way that I see you.
And that's hard, man. My mother used to tell us her job was to get us to 18,
Mm,
to make sure that we lived to 18. Like that's how serious it was. And then we got to 18 and she said, my job's to get you to 25. And my brother died 2 weeks after his Omar Rahimullah died 2 weeks after his 25th birthday. And my mother would say to me, my job is just to get you to 30. Like she was kind of living in these short-term increments because the world was after us, man. Like,
mhm,
like the world was really after us and she knew it. And she
mhm.
would tell us, and it takes time for us to see ourselves because we look in the mirror and that self-hatred exists because everywhere we turn, we're believing them. We're believing who they tell us we are.
Yep. I mean, it's a stereo, right?
Stereo. That's right.
Stereo.
Right. I love that. That's real.
Like
That's real.
there's no other way to describe it. It's in the corner store when you're getting followed. It's in school when you're getting suspended. It's on the street when you're stopped and you're frisked. It's because you're out after 10 o'clock. It's in stereo.
and
And
and and they don't conceal it, right? So we're talking about teachers talking about you're nothing, you're gonna die in a pool of your own blood, like vicious stuff that they would say and do to us, right? So when you say it's in stereo, that's real, man. you
it's in
know
stereo. So you said uh Mama Bats wasn't enough. And I hear how you talk, and this was in a talk that you did. Um And I want to put that into context. You say she wasn't enough to prevent you from experiencing the things that you experienced before you got it, right?
Right.
And um I want to acknowledge her for never giving up. I
Mhm.
want to acknowledge the memory of your mother for always pouring into you. Um when did it actually click for you?
I think it was inch by inch, right? Piece by piece. I don't
Mm.
I don't think it just I didn't just wake up one day. I didn't have a Coach Carter that came into my life and I wanted to stay on the team, or a love interest that said if you get out these streets or I'm gonna leave. It wasn't like that for me. It was like it
Mm.
was just gradual. It was just gradual. A big part of it clicked, I would say, when my brother died, because then I realized there was no one left to take care of my children or my mother.
Wow.
So that changed my life because he was a good guy. He was a really sweet guy, man.
Mhm.
But I was still in the streets making poor choices. Still had gotten locked up once after that. So it was just gradual. It was like, people. It's clicked when I started to really think about legacy, I think, and who I was. Like I knew I was different.
Mhm.
Always knew I was different, but the older I got, the more I could look back on my life and my current circumstances and realize it. My mother invested too much
Mhm.
for me. I remember one time I ran away from home at like 14, 15 years old, right? So I'm in like Springfield, Massachusetts, like in the middle of nowhere I mean, you know how far that is from Brooklyn, right? Like I'm out there hustling and this is going to be weird, but this it was 1991. This lady used to come out with a 1991 Nissan Stanza, and I would drive her car around. And one day she would go inside and buy drugs with the other guys, and I wasn't in the house with them doing what they was doing, so I would drive this car around. And one day I looked in the back and I said, "Your daughter's back there," and she
Mhm.
said, "Take me with you." She had like a 2, 3 year old daughter back there, and my mother raised me better than that. I said, we selling drugs to this woman, and she's leaving her child in this car with a
Mhm.
stranger. And I went home. Now, I so I always have my mother's voice is what I'm saying. Like I'm in the middle of nowhere, and
Mhm.
just that. The guns, the violence, the drugs, none of that stopped me. But me knowing that the black community was in jeopardy. And I was young, so everything I was doing was jeopardizing the black community. But there was something about looking back and seeing that little girl and me saying, my mother did not raise me like that. And,
Wow.
and and that message has been consistent in my mind to this day. When I'm in a meeting, if I don't speak up to protect a black woman or against injustice, I will say, my mom's ain't raised me that way. Like I have to disrupt this. So it happens. We hear you, right? We hear you. Uh, but the stereo drowns it out, the drugs drown it out, the sex, all of the other things drown it out, you know.
Yeah. Wow. When you got it, what made you decide that you wanted to use your got it for everybody else?
Again, that was my mother. I mean, the house was always full of people. She was a Panther. She talked about her people. She shared with her people. She loved black boys. It wasn't just her sons. We moved from Brooklyn to the Poconos, and she took two kids from the block with her. She would have took the whole block. She like literally moved them out there with her, took care of them as they were her own sons, and then created a community there of the black boys that were scattered about. So
Mhm, mhm,
I've always known. Um, that I had a responsibility, a duty to give back, right? It's
mhm.
and we're taught that young. If you break it, you fix it, right? So the community that are harmed, I have to repair. And the heroes that I was brought up studying, we're all we have. My mother wasn't about integration. She wasn't about dependence. She was about hard work, and she would always tell me, you're gonna work hard in your life. So you're either gonna work hard with your back or with your brain, and you got to make a choice. But you're going to work hard.
Wow.
You know.
Work hard with your back or your brain. That's a whole word all by itself.
It's real though, right?
It is. It definitely is real. When I learned your first stop after you moved out of Brooklyn, I'm a Harlemite, and
Mhm.
And so, I'm gonna let you make it on the Brooklyn thing, but it's all love. But
I stopped in Harlem for a while too. That's where I learned to calm down a little bit.
that's what nah,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
play.
No, no, it's about the love, man. Seriously, like we didn't have the love that I got in Harlem, man. Like
Yeah,
Harlem is about love, man.
yeah.
You know.
Um, Back in the day, like back then, 91, 93, 94, 95, moving to the Poconos was like you was George and Wheezy Jefferson. It was like
Yeah.
the come on up, right? Like you was moving on up if you moved to the Poconos. But it is also very, very different. So I moved my children out of New York, and our first stop was Pennsylvania. It wasn't the Poconos, but it was Pennsylvania. And now I'm in Texas. And they grew up in different environments, but they also rebelled against that. What was that first transition like for you? And if you had advice for moms who were moving their children out of a specific space, um, how do you cultivate unity there?
Mm. That transition was rough, right? We talk about culture shock, and that's an understatement. We had each other. Like I shared, she brought a couple of our friends from the block with us, and then there were other guys there whose mothers had gotten them out. This was about survival.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was life or death for her sons. Like everybody was getting killed, getting life in prison or 25 to life. So she had to do it. And what I realized when I was in my early 30s was how young my mother was.
Mm.
We never realize how young you are when you sacrifice. My mother was 22 when she had me. So she didn't have me at 14, but 22 is young, right?
Mm.
So she moved in kind of like part of her prime to this mountain in the middle of nowhere to save her sons. Like she was a Brooklynite. All her friends were in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and I didn't appreciate that till later on. Um, so I survived by bonding with my people. I mean, we had our folks. It was a handful of us. The advice to mothers is I think moving is a good thing. I think you got to change the environment. Sometimes you got to get your son out of Atlanta. You got to get him out of Philly. Go to Decatur or to your uncle in Texas. I mean, I think and it allows us an opportunity to recreate ourselves. So I moved and I went to school and I tried to do the right thing. But I had never tried that before, right? And she walked me through that. So really, really, my mother talked to me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really communicating with your sons, even when it seems like we're not listening. We'll get it someday. But move if you can. I mean, my mom was a nurse, so the story I tell is not, I never missed a meal.
Mm-hmm.
But outside my door, everyone was missing meals.
Mm-hmm.
And that brought some confusion to me. But she really communicated the why, the opportunities that I had, that life could be different here, that I didn't have to continue to make the decisions because I had these maladaptive behaviors that I brought to the both of those
Mm-hmm.
survival skills. But she tried to talk me through that. So I continue to communicate, and if you can't find support, um, the other thing which is cliche and it's hard is we got to have men in our lives. A lot of us don't have men in our lives, and the ones that do, there's tension. So we have to practice what I've been taught is the medicine of reconciliation. If I don't know my father or have a relationship with my father, manhood is going to be rough. That journey is going to be rough because I'm going to learn how to love from a man's perspective, how to be a man from my peers.
Right.
You can tell me all you want to tell me, but we talking amongst each other all day long about, this is what love is, this is what sex is, this is what, also my disrespected you, this is how you respond. So you need some uncles and fathers and brothers and neighbors to help you do that.
Right. We are talking on a new talk for moms of Black boys. This is Mama, You Are Making History. Um, I want to talk about how your mother did make history. So let's start with I love you. You have several programs that you're involved in, several things that you are completely and totally entrenched in for the community. But one of the things that I love, love, love is Radical Welcome.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Radical welcome, man. That is what I needed coming up. Radical welcome recognizes that rejection is violence. That You shared that. I tell the story about being pushed out,
Mhm,
being left back, being expelled, like
mhm,
always being rejected, ignored in these spaces where all I wanted was to belong and to be welcome. So now that I'm older and I have some privilege and some power, I create and teach and promote this concept of radical welcome,
mhm.
across systems, across communities, in homes. Think about this idea when your child walks in the door, and when you understand outside the door what they've experienced, right? And that's not to minimize what you've experienced, right? We can relate on that level, to smile and to greet them. My wife says, you always talk about how your mother used to wake you up. She would wake me up, Hashan, hi, like just smiling, and I think it was intentional, right? Like
Mhm.
smiling at me when she would wake me up, even if I was late from school. And that's that idea of radical welcome. Where are the spaces that Black boys can enter and know not only that they belong, but that someone is happy and excited to
Yeah,
see them show up. And we got to create that in our homes.
yeah.
We have to, every time I see my son, I'm gonna light up. My grandsons, I'm gonna light up. My daughter, my wife, I'm gonna, because I know y'all going through it at the job. Y'all are being abused, ignored on the train. You got you got to deal with, you go into Starbucks and you don't got enough money to buy something, you can't use the toilet. So when you're around me or any system or any organization that I'm working on, I create, that is the expectation. That is the bare minimum. We're gonna clap when you walk in the room. We're
Mhm.
gonna smile. We're gonna love you. And then the other part of radical welcome is this idea of how do we treat you when you don't show up as your best self?
Right.
Because my mother still loved me to death when she had to come to court and get me, or
Mhm.
done something crazy. So that's radical welcome, man. That you are enough, you are loved, you are okay, you are perfect, whole, and complete. Um, and what does it look like when systems implement that? So
Right.
we work with healthcare systems, we work with schools, especially, man. Like treat our children like they belong and they are worthy. Like
Yeah.
you have it in your eyes when you see me. Like like, bro, I ain't seen you in a while. How you doing? Like that's what we need to have.
Mm.
At 11 years old, that's what I needed.
You need
Somebody.
you need a grace. You
I
know,
need
we
grace.
are launching the Grace campaign, and it aligns perfectly with what you just said. Grace is redemption, and grace is love, and grace is understanding and unconditional and welcoming, and that smile and the joy that says you are not, your whole self is not the sum of the worst thing that you have done in this moment,
Right.
and there's so many more parts of you. I can love your whole being, but there's so many parts of you that deserve that grace, that deserve that redemption. So I personally, I love radical welcome. I'm gonna start using it. I'm gonna say, I learned that from Hasshan Batts. Radical welcome. I'm going to use that terminology specifically. You got a lot of other stuff going. Let's talk a little bit about Tree.
So Tree is a curriculum that I've developed um, through all my work with surviving trauma, and then going back and supporting my people. We talk about lifting as we climb. So this concept of hurt people, we really have been working on this idea that healing people help people heal. And Tree is this concept called is trauma informed care, restorative practices, emotional intelligence, and equity. And I don't believe that those can be separated.
Hmm.
Trauma informed care got sexy. All these organizations wanted to call us. They come in and do some trauma informed care training. George Floyd and the so-called racial reckoning happened. They said, "Come do some equity training." You can't do equity training without understanding. And we say it's trauma informed care. We're talking about individual, family, community, historical, organizational trauma, right? Like you can't talk about equity without acknowledging the repair that is needed, from a historical standpoint. So I've developed a curriculum. We have online courses. We provide training for folks in the community. We consult and provide training with institutions that looks at all of those, right? We talked about restorative practice a little bit, right? Like you can't do trauma informed care work without looking at. I'll give you an example in healthcare settings. If you miss 3 appointments, you get fired from the practice. You can no longer go to your dentist, your dialysis center, your
Mm-hmm.
doctor if you miss 3 appointments. No call, no shows. So we say to be trauma informed, you have to have this idea of restorative practices, right? Like what is really going on that is contributing to you not showing up, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And we want to incorporate all of that together, and that's what the tree curriculum does.
Talk to me about how the tree curriculum helps parents, moms, dads understand the development of trauma in their own homes
Yeah,
and combats that.
thank you. That's a beautiful question. I mean, that's the foundation of it. Actually started as a parenting curriculum,
Mhm,
and it looks at, so we understand that trauma, adverse childhood experiences, right? All of those things we talked about pre-11, at 11, impact brain development, impact decision making, and impact health and life outcomes.
mhm,
Um, Untreated, right? So I talked about finding my grandmother dead, witnessing murders, getting jumped, all of these things. If they're untreated, they're going to impact my life and my decision making. My cortisol levels are higher. There
mhm,
are chemicals in my body that are not functioning. My central nervous system is dysregulated, right? So I talk about having these asthma attacks that grew into panic attacks, that grew into anxiety.
mhm,
Um, we are just walking dysregulated, and you have to find ways to do that for your children and for yourself. So the
mhm,
street curriculum also helps you to understand the experiences that you had,
mhm,
how they show up in your parenting, and how they impact your children. We're talking not only historical and epigenetical stuff like in your DNA, but your parenting style, right? I often tell the story because Mama Bass loved me, but that with that came with some beatings, and she was gonna grab whatever was around. So she loved me, but there was some other behaviors there, right? That
mhm,
she had to work on. But
mhm,
well, where did my mother learn to parent? She
mhm,
learned from her mother, my grandmother, who also loved me, who was in the home.
mhm,
And where did she learn to parent? From her mother. And where did she learn to parent? From her mother. And then we take this back and we say, where did they learn to parent? Well, I'm an African descendant of enslaved Africans. So these slave masters, these brutal pedophiles, savages, taught my ancestors how to parent, and those continue to get passed down. So the tree curriculum helps you to understand that we have to break those cycles.
right,
And here is how. So not only are we saying don't do this, we're replacing it with other ways that you can
right.
communicate with your children, that you can settle yourself, that you can practice emotional intelligence, that you can have healthier relationships. That's just a small example of how it supports parents. And then also, how do you support your children with things that are going on in the community and in school?
And I like it. I like it because it's not just problem driven, right? Like we could talk about the problem all day long, right? We can identify what the issues are. Um, your mom, you said she was 20 or 22 when she had you.
She was 22, 20 when she had my brother, 22 when she had me. I believe.
So I had my first child when I was 16. And so at 16, I I was dealing with so many, like my life was dysregulation, right? Like I was always dysregulated, and I can look back at my journey and go through all of those things. And so I was fortunate to have people who showed me ways and poured into me, and like you, told me that I was better than what my behavior way back when was, and so I was able to lift myself out of that. But I can remember times where it surfaced, where I witnessed my teenage daughter with a specific behavior, and it took me back to my behavior. One of the things that I tell parents all the time is we can't add the adult connotation to children's behavior.
Say that
And
again.
we can't add the adult connotation to children's
Mm,
behavior.
yes, yes, yes.
Like, so I can't come with my adult knowledge and my grown
That's
up
her.
knowledge and then define my children's
That's right.
behavior.
That's
And
right.
I had to learn that. I had to learn that just because that meant this to me doesn't mean that that's what it means to my children. And it's adultification, right? Like we have been forced in our society in a lot of ways to create little adults in our children's bodies. And one of the things on the New Talk that we talk about all the time, and the basic premise for this podcast is how do we manage the safety portion, the speak that you got from Mama Batts and Black Boy Joy. and and children's behavior, how do we navigate the outside world without traumatizing them in their inside world?
Mm, mm. How do we let our babies be babies, right?
Yep.
Like the world is gonna punch on them. The world. I mean, and everything that I talk about, there's always this idea that compassion and accountability must coexist. So
Mhm.
I'm never talking about absolving myself or others from
Mhm.
their behavior, the consequences of their behavior, or accountability. But it's like we got to let our babies be babies, man. Like, and we got to let our children be children. We got to let 24-year-olds be 24-year-olds while their brains are still developing. And you're right, I can't bring my 48-year-old thinking to my relationship with my 4-year-old grandson, and that's what we oftentimes do, right? So when you think about the tree curriculum, there's a component of it that's emotional intelligence,
Mm.
where you got to pause and ask yourself, where's this coming from?
Mhm.
We all these things happen out in the world. We carry them home, and the dishes are dirty, and then we end up breaking every dish in the sink, and we just go into this rage that it might be about our relationship, it might be about work, it might be about Uncle Tony when we were in third grade, and it's not that the dishes weren't real,
Mhm.
need to be addressed, but we went 0 to 100 as
Mhm.
parents. We do some harm because we haven't dealt with our own stuff. And Tree talks about that. Like, one of the obligations I think we have as parents is to deal with our stuff so that it doesn't get messy and bleed on everybody around us.
Amen. Amen.
It's
And
not easy, right?
no, you're right. It's not easy. It's not easy. I'm still in therapy. Um, but it is, those are the restorative practices that we owe ourselves.
That's right.
We are products of the boomers. Um and I have my own feelings about baby boomers. Um but they didn't have it easy either, right?
That's right.
And so now here we come, and many of are of the sandwich generation now, right? Like, we're at that age where we are taking care of parents and children at the same time.
And grandchildren.
Yep, and grandchildren, and trying to figure that kind of stuff out. So yes, I think I think we owe it to ourselves to be whole, and we owe it to our children to be whole. Absolutely. Um, One of your other passion projects is gun violence. You support a great deal of the community of people who have lost children to gun violence. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I think of who, there's this question we always ask or get asked is, who are you? Then
Mhm.
it says, whose are you? Right? Like to whom do you belong? To whom are you accountable to?
Mhm.
In all of my work, I'm accountable to mothers.
Mhm.
Um, and most often it's mothers of Black boys, right? Like, this is why I'm excited to be here. And you can't talk about gun violence without talking about Black boys. Not
Mhm.
not to say it doesn't impact other people, but it's like,
Mhm.
so when the mothers call on me, I show up. I know the pain of losing a child to gun violence. I know the pain. I'm a survivor and former perpetrator of gun violence, and to 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 redeem myself is the word used earlier. I gotta fix this, man. We caused it in a certain way. Like, our generation had it wrong, and we taught it and perpetuated it. So I gotta support people in healing, and I have to put processes and practices and programs and policies in place. And that's what I wake up to do. Right? Like, and it works. I live in a community where we had dozens of youth were murdered. We started a program called um, In Youth Violence,
Mhm.
and in the last 2 years we've had one 16-year-old kill a 15-year-old. Like, and we said zero youth violence. Excuse me, it was called Zero Youth Violence. We said we were going to have zero youth murdered in our community. We're working with a community now that started an initiative called Not One More. Right. So being a visionary, being hopeful, having these aspirational, big, bold ideas works. Like, not one child in our community should be murdered,
Mhm.
and that is the work. So I do that with legislators, politicians. I do it with for-profit corporations. They
Mhm.
have a corporate responsibility to support the communities in which they live, but primarily it's with the community, right? The nonprofits, people, boots on the ground, credible messengers, mothers. We partner with a group called Mother to Mother. Jeannie Garcia lost her son Kareem Fed, and them mothers show up, man. Like,
Mm,
all across the country, these mothers show up, man. Like they turn their pain into like this idea of triumph and support and love, and they keep their sons' names alive. So my
mm.
work is part of that.
Amen. I want to talk about the healing journey you see moms who have lost children go through. Um, One, how do you assist with that? How do your programs help with that? But two, if you have any advice for moms who have um, survived their children because of gun violence, what would it be?
So consistently, I hear, and my mother said it, that mothers are not supposed to bury their children.
Mhm,
I hear that consistently. I have some friends that tell me this is not a club you want to be a part of. My advice to mothers, whether it's early on or later on, is feel.
mm,
Allow yourself to feel. Like, it is going to hurt. It is going to hurt for a long time, um, for life, right? My mother went to the grave feeling that pain.
mhm,
But you can heal.
mhm,
But you have to feel first. It's part of the grieving process, right? You have to feel it. You can't mask it with drugs. You can't mask it with relationships. You can't mask it with anger and rage. Um, so get the support that you need: therapy, companionship, like peer companionship, like a support group. We need community. We need people that we can be honest with. Journaling is a healing art, but just feel it. I mean,
mhm,
that's. I remember when my mother died. A brother called me. And he said, "You're gonna be driving down the road years from now. You're just gonna start crying, and you don't know why."
mm,
And that was the best advice he gave me, right? Because it helped me to understand this is gonna be there for life.
mhm,
And I, from watching my mother and the many mothers that I am in a relationship with, is going to be here for life. It's not going to hurt as bad every day, but it's going to show up. That's your baby, and you need community. That's the key. You need community. You cannot lose a child alone.
ooh, yeah. And grieving is not linear. I tell a lot of my people that it's not a linear process. You just never know when it's going to show up. We have a question in the chat and it says Dianetics versus therapy. And I'm be honest, I don't know what Dianetics is. Can you explain that to me?
Can I explain it?
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
No, no, no. I'm thinking about that book from back in the days. I don't know if that's what they're referring to.
Okay. I'm not sure. Marcy, if you can
I mean,
expound.
how you spell it? Is it diet?
No, I'm gonna put it up. There it goes right there on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, Marcy! Shout out to Marcy, man. This the homie. I know Marcy.
Okay.
Marcy travels the country. This is a black mother. She loves her. Listen, so one thing about being a black mother, you're gonna love your son until he's 100, I guess, right? Marcy's son, a
Yeah.
grown man. That's her baby boy, man. She loves her, and she one of our mothers in the community. So
Okay, so she said yes, the book.
I don't know a lot about it. It was an older book back in the days that I remember.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Marcy, I think you're talking a little bit over our heads, but we're gonna have to
Yeah.
get back with you so we could learn some more about it.
So Marcy, there was a shooting. What was the school in Baltimore? There was a shooting. Marcy, it was recently. It'll come to me. But the HBCU, maybe about 6 months ago, Marcy had us came and got some shirts. Had us go out to the school. Like, black mothers just don't play, man. They take care of their babies. Her daughter was in school like states away, and she made sure that they were taken care of.
She said Morgan State.
Morgan, thank you, Morgan.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. That's one thing that I will say. Moms of Black Boys United, we pride ourselves on being fierce advocates, on showing up for our people. And it is it is heartwarming to see you at 48 since you went ahead and shared your age. It's heartwarming with a 1-year-old baby.
1 year old baby.
With a one-year-old
Nobody won.
baby.
Little
Every
Hasshan,
time
he is like CrossFit for me, man.
I'm telling you, every time you talk about having a 1-year-old, my heart just kind of
But
jumps.
I'm getting to watch my wife be a mother of a black boy because she had a daughter.
Uh-huh.
So it is so different, man. Right? Like, she's worried about him at 1. She knows what's outside that door.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and that leads like to my next we participated some years ago in a study that talked about preschool expulsion for
Right.
black boys,
That's
right? For black boys for regular ages and stages behavior. And one thing that you shared is 3.5 million children are suspended from school a year. 2.4 million people are incarcerated and 7 million people are under some sort of um governmental control, judicial control. And it's those numbers are crazy because we know that we are something like 13% of the population but 60% of those numbers.
that's right.
And so the disproportionality of what that looks like is nuts to me. And as we talk about gun violence, as we talk about loving ourselves, like one of our campaigns is the Protect Them campaign. And that is an image campaign because we are so much more than what our community says our sons are, right? We want our sons to be seen for all of the great things that they do, and we want them to receive grace when they're not making all of the right decisions. But it's baffling to me that the school to prison pipeline is so vibrant in our community, and we don't seem to have a way to truly dismantle it. If you had to give us 5 steps to truly affecting change, what would they be?
In within schools to prisons.
Mhm.
So first, I'll say is recognize that it's not a pipeline; it's a nexus. It's the same system, um,
Mm.
and we have to understand that the schools are intentionally preparing our sons and children in general for prison.
Wow.
So I would say start with that awareness. I tell the story that the only thing the New York City public school system did for me was prepare me for prison.
Wow.
Positive, positive. I was able to survive juvenile facilities, adult facilities as a juvenile because of the dignity violations I experienced from teachers because of the violence in school. So I think understanding the reality, especially in an urban context, of what our children's school experience is, right? They are spending 8 hours a day, however long it is, with people that do not love them, that are afraid of them, that do not believe in them, that despise them. Um, and that's the first thing, right? And then support them. So we have to my mother used to call it literally like deprogramming us. Like, we have to unlearn some of the things we've learned primarily about ourselves in those systems,
Mhm.
right? So back to that radical welcome. So embrace your children consistently, daily, every time you see them, with love, even when they're off the mark. And I'm still talking about the school to prison pipeline, so to speak. That the way that we divert our children away from that pipeline is to let them know that they're better than, that they're worthy of, that they have worth, that they are beautiful, that they are brilliant. Um, when they're in environments all day that are breaking them down. So that's two. Three. Hmm. I mean, we talked about healing, right? You got to do that self healing.
Mhm.
And people say, well, what does that have to do with my child going to prison? We got to be fully equipped to fight against that machine. And that means we got to do self-care. That means I mean, it sounds corny, but we got to eat right. We got to watch what we're consuming, what they're exposed to. We can't be normalizing violence, normalizing prison, uh, four, I would say losers running packs,
Mm.
right? So who are you exposing your children to? Not only what are you exposing to, but who's in the home and what are the behaviors that are acceptable in the home. So we have to and this is not blaming and shaming, this is about self-reflection.
Mhm.
We got
Mhm.
to look at how are we showing up, and who are we exposing them to. And five is you talked about the worst decisions you making or the poor decisions you're making don't define who you are. I
Mhm.
would say the poor decisions that you make, right? Like really emphasizing that don't define who you are. The bad things that you do, the worst things that you do, don't define who our children are and remind them of that. And the other part of that coin is and the bad things that are happening to them.
Yeah.
We spent our whole lives feeling ashamed for things that we had no control over. Um,
Yeah.
so to give your children space to communicate with you, and if they don't communicate with you, to know that, you know, it's not their fault. All the crazy that's happening, man. So I just kind of made those five up, you know,
Mhm.
in
I like
response.
him though. I like him. I like him. I like him. I like him. Therapy. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I think that finding someone to partner with in your healing journey is absolutely necessary. Whatever kind of therapist that is for you. But I also know that there's a huge stigma around the Black man and the therapeutic process. What advice do you have to men about their own personal healing journey and who they partner with?
So the advice I have to men, starting with boys, right, is because the first woman we learn to abuse is our mothers.
Mhm.
Um, Stop abusing women. Stop harming women. Don't. I don't want to say stop. Don't hurt women. Right. Like that's first. 4 Black women are murdered every day. And
Mm,
that's a conversation that we have to have, and we have to have it with our boys and with the men in our community. I had a friend tell me one time. She said the rapists, the abusers, the dirtbags are your peer
mm,
group. It's not them. It's us. She's like, look around your circle. So to the men, stop taking your pain out on the women that love us,
mm,
and to your point, that requires healing practices, right? Go get some therapy, man. Like, go get some therapy. Go do the work. Like, really commit to it, because we're creating these generational cycles that we don't want to talk about a lot of time. We're contributing to it. And I love Black men. Man. I grew and learned that I have a love for Black men that I never realized that I did, because when you are the best, you are the best. But when you are bruised, you are bruising and damaging everything in your stratosphere.
mm,
So we have a duty as Black men to heal, to do the work to heal, to find the supports we need to heal, to make commitments to healing, and to making healthy decisions and being in healthy relationships. Get it right. Do the work.
Amen. Listen, and I'll echo that for Black women as well, because I think we live on both sides of that.
That's right.
We have a question from Chastity Rice that says, "Do you recommend homeschooling for our young Black boys?"
Without a doubt, if you're able to, I do. Yeah, and a homeschooling community. So not I believe that healing, excellence, success occurs in authentic relationships and within community. So I'm not saying isolate your son, right? You have to have them in relationship with others. So, but yeah, if you have the ability to, I think homeschooling is ideal.
All right, I
Even,
don't think
even if I just want to say, even if your children are in school, you have to homeschool them, right?
absolutely.
We
That
are there
part.
for the people. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, your mom used to say it's the reprogramming, right? Like, because some of what they're getting and a lot of what they're getting in school is not necessarily our story. Um uh
And it's dangerous. The image that who they told you little Kimberly was, like, that's not who she was. Like, so when they come home, find out what's going on and tell them how much they're loved.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Bass, I am so happy to have had this conversation with you. Um Mama, you are making history. Your mama made history. It just to be a fly on the wall for your journey and to see all of what she poured into you come to fruition is truly remarkable. You are truly a monument in your community, and we just love seeing the work that you're doing. I want to give you a moment to give any closing remarks. Tell people how they can find you, where they can find you. Shout out your books or whatever. Let us know what you're doing out there in the community.
Yeah, my closing remarks are: you are making history. Don't give up. It's hard. It's daunting. It's painful. Love your babies. Love your babies through it. Take care of yourself. Love yourself through it. Like, you are enough. Don't let this world shame you into thinking, because you were working and couldn't show up to the PTA meeting, that you do not love your children. We know that you do. There's nothing better in this world than a mother that gives you her all and loves and adores you, and I want to say thank you for that. How to reach me? HasshanBatts.com, HASSHAN.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, social media, my books. They're on the website. Go to the website. It's my name. Like that's the easiest way
Mm,
to find me. If you can't write it down, blacktrauma.com will get you there too. So
okay.
that directs to my website. But love yourself, man. For the rest of the night, just tell yourself how much you love yourself and what a great job you're doing. And I'm here to reiterate that. That's the prescription from the doc. Their prescription to all the mothers of Black boys listening is to and when I say love yourself, affirmations, right? What do you love about yourself? What are you doing well? Because the ways in which we speak to ourselves are harsh, man. And we need you to be well.
Amen. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in and joining me. Join us next month for our Autism Awareness and Acceptance campaign. We will be talking to fathers of Black boys on the spectrum. We will be highlighting the talents of our awesome sons on the spectrum. You don't want to miss it. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Be well. Thank you.